I want to give a really big welcome to Lynn Basa. We are excited to have Lynn with us today. So a little bit about her. Lynn has completed numerous public art commissions around the country. Lynn is the founder of the Milwaukee Avenue Alliance, a community organization dedicated to the equitable, cultural, and economic reawakening of 3 blocks of the vintage working class Main Street, where her storefront studio is located. Lynn has an MFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago and an MPA in Public Art Policy from the University of Washington. She wrote a book called The Artist's Guide, based on a class she developed and taught at ISC. And just a reminder, everyone, if you could all stay muted, we would greatly appreciate that right now. So, Lynn, I will let you make sure you unmute first, but then I'll let you take it away, Lynn, and we'll talk about what we're doing today.
Okay, I wanted to do this in all Q&A format because I've sat through far too many hour-long talks where 50 minutes were spent with a lecture and 10 minutes were spent for questions from the audience, and then the audience always had a lot of, pent-up questions. And so what I'm going to do today is just throw it all to you, and you all are going to determine what the structure of this conversation is. And I'm going to start out with a couple of formative questions so that you can put your questions in the chat. But first of all, I want to get a virtual hand raise. If everyone go down to where the reactions are, I want to know how many people are new to public art commissions and haven't done one yet. So raise your little yellow hand. Let me see if I could get this view. Hold on. Close.
I can change to the gallery view just for a moment so we can see.
Yeah, I'd love to see the gallery view so I can see everybody. Oh, hi. Boy, there you all are.
Yeah, we're all filtering in.
Okay, there's page 102. Okay, great. And then raise your hand if you have done a public art commission before. And it could be 1 or it could be 30. It doesn't matter. I just want to get a sense of the room here. Okay, that seems like a pretty even spread. So what I have 2 questions, and I want you to respond to them by putting your questions. It's a question to elicit a question in the chat. And the first question is, if you are new to public art and have not applied for public art commissions yet, what's stopping you? What are the obstacles that have kept you from doing it? And they can be personal or administrative. It's just whatever. Let's just see what the obstacles are and what we can talk about to remove them. And then if you have done public art commissions, what did you learn that other artists should know? And that doesn't preclude that you're not going to have questions. If you have questions, of course, ask them, because the deeper you get into doing public art, then you come into like a whole new room full of other questions that you didn't have when you were a beginner. So let's just get it all out there. And then Nicole is going to go through the questions in order. And if nobody has any questions yet, Nicole has some that she can do to get the conversation started.
Yeah, so just a reminder, whether you're still in the platform or more in a Zoom view, just go into that chat. We're checking.
So Nicole, what were the questions you had?
Yeah, so let me kick off because I'm sure this will come up. Have you found certain call platforms or channels to be more generative than others, especially recently with the influx of new users on call for entry, submittable at all?
Okay. Tell me that again.
They were asking, have you found certain or specific call platforms or channels to be more generative than others?
It's really consolidated down to 4 right now. And that is publicartist.org, call for entry or cafe.org, Coda Works, and is it Any Squared? There's one more, and then the International Sculpture Center, puts out calls too. But here's for if you're first starting out, be sure you find out what your local, your city, state, county, transit authority, chances are they all have a public art program. And you need to find out, and Parks Department, start local and make sure you get onto those mailing lists so that you get notified of local calls. Because some of these larger platforms, like Call for Entry, publicartist.org, they will put out a call. It costs them money. It costs these agencies money to put out a call for artists. And so usually they'll just be big national calls, or maybe there'll be big regional calls, but there'll be lots of little local ones, even your Chamber of Commerce, because everybody wants public art now. I'm old enough to remember the day when we still had to justify having public art being paid for by taxpayers' dollars. And now it's people want it. So we're living in the golden age of public art. And we are living in the golden age of murals too. There's been a real revival in a demand for artists who can do community murals.
Right, anybody, we have a lot of comments coming in, so maybe we can interpret those. From Nancy, she's finding very few calls for temporary outdoor art installations. Do you have maybe suggestions on how to look for those, or?
I see a lot of those. And I was actually just looking at the call for entry.org, cafe.org, and I saw a bunch of them. And those are the ones that you'll find locally a lot, like your Chamber of Commerce, or the Chicago Botanic Gardens, for example, has a very prestigious one. Parks Department here has a call for temporary artworks. So yeah, they're definitely out there. It's and I think hopefully, Nancy, now that you know they're out there, you'll just like keep looking until you find them. Because you do have to kind of hunt and peck, because there's, for like, again, for a lot of these local ones and regional ones, you kind of have to find out about them by being signed up for like every single mailing list for every single agency that you can think of. And I don't know how you are about self-initiating, but that's a really good way to get started, is like, to go to a Chamber of Commerce, to go to a business. I don't know what kind of work you do, but to self-initiate, and that'll really help build your portfolio.
And speaking of getting started, I think that perfectly leads into this question that someone had applied for several public sculpture competitions, but they always ask for a portfolio of previous public art. How do you kind of break in if you haven't done it already?
I devoted a big section of the second edition of my book to that, because that was a question that kept coming up in the workshops that I did around the country for the first edition. It is really a catch-22, and it is the one way out of that is, again, to start initiating your own. And again, I can't be more specific because it's like, it depends on what you do. And then, of course, documenting them, finding local and regional opportunities to do them. Also applying to RFPs, requests for proposals instead of requests for qualifications. Lots of times, hyper-local requests for proposals, they're just casting a wide net and they're looking for the idea. And if you can submit a good idea, then you will get, you have a better chance there. Also, fewer people apply for local and regional ones. And here's another thing. I had this really outstanding studio manager at one point, and she took it upon herself to do a study about how many applications are received for what budget amounts. And like, there's a huge drop off for budget amounts lower than 100,000. And so you can start if you're just starting out, apply for ones that are, you know, $100,000 or less. And of course, you have to have one thing I did when I first started out is I mocked up my like one of my paintings in a mural type thing for a mosaic mural, but I had already found a fabricator who had a really good reputation. So you can partner with a fabricator who has a good reputation and can guarantee to the agency that's commissioning the artwork that the work will be done. It's not that they're against having new people do it. They just can't afford, because it's government money. They can't afford to take a chance on someone who's not going to come through. So another tried and true way is to partner with a fabricator who's already done public art commissions. And I think Sculpture Magazine has a really good list of who some of the fabricators are. But if you live in a larger city, and also just what I do is I don't ask other artists to tell me who their fabricators are, because that's a little bit intrusive and it puts them on the spot. And why should they be telling you who their fabricator is so that you could compete against them? You know, it's like, not that we're competing against each other, because we're all artists. But if you go to the Americans for the Arts website and go to, it's really hard to find. They have, not the Americans for the Arts, but this thing is such a vast website because it's a huge organization. Go to the year in review. And that's every year at their big annual conference. They have a juried selection of the best public art commissions that were done in the country. And they list the fabricators. And when you start educating yourself on who the fabricators are, and there are many, and there are actually more than there ever were before. I used to feel like I had a good handle on who all of them, all the metal and mosaic fabricators were. But now there are so many, like digital mediums or digital fabrication, CNC cutters. You could just like do any material. I just found out that there's a digital clay machine that can like do sculptures out of clay. It just like blurbs the clay out. And so there are a bajillion fabricators. Partner with a fabricator. I'm digressing into the whole fabrication conversation, but it's an important one to know. And it is one way to leap over into, you don't have anything in your portfolio, to starting to apply for requests for proposals instead of requests for qualifications, and partnering with a fabricator that has experience.
Great. So Philip, we have a question, and Philip, feel free to unmute to specify more if needed. He's asking, how would he help on a public art project as he is not in an art community?
So what do you mean help? You mean like?
Well, I'm not a trained artist, but I do art on my property. I have 5 acres and I have different pieces of art that I've created. But when you're talking about these kind of commissions and the time and energy put into them, I wouldn't feel qualified to apply for a public sculpture, but I would love to help them with that. I'm very handy. It's just, and I'm also retired, so I have time, but I don't have contact with an art community. So I wouldn't even know how to, I assume on any large public art piece, they need help.
Where do you live?
In South Jersey, in the Pine Barrens.
Okay.
Is everybody in Seattle?
No, I'm
We're all over the place here.
And do you have really good, they don't necessarily have to be taken by professional, but they have to look really good photographs of your sculpture?
Yeah, I mean, I have a website that it has all our art on there. Some of it I've done myself and some I've just acquired, but.
Well, you're really far ahead then, because you've actually done sculpture. If I were you, I would just, and you have a website. I haven't seen it, but it has to look like an artist portfolio. Your website does.
I just have pictures of the things I have on our property. We have,
That's right.
trails and stuff where people could walk around if they want.
Man, that's amazing. No, you're so far ahead. What worries me is people who are like, I'm a painter and I want to do public art. And I'm like, okay, how are you going to show something in your portfolio that shows that you can do something large and outside or large and in a lobby? But you've already got sculpture. So yeah, just photograph it, start applying for things. You don't have to be part of an art community, although, it wouldn't hurt to show up to some first of all, you need to find out in your area who's commissioning art, like with the New Jersey State Arts Commission, or do they have one of those? Is your
Okay, so if there is someone commissioning a piece of art, then I could tell them I'm not applying to do the piece, but I would like to assist the artist that gets the project.
Well,
Do they
no,
ever do that? I don't know.
why wouldn't you apply to do the piece since you already know how to build sculpture?
Probably because I'd be too intimidated to take on such a large, something like that. When I'm doing it on my own property, it's.
No, you're ready to apply for things. You need to just start applying for things. Somebody's waving their hand. Tom?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I totally disagree with you. I have 40 years of doing public art, and what this gentleman's talking about is a really good question, a good point. The very best way to really get good at public art and understand what you're doing is to be mentored by somebody or be able to actually work with somebody in terms of technique. One of the biggest problems of so much public art is that artists are dependent on either finding fabricators or they just don't know the techniques. And oftentimes they do really shoddy work because they haven't really been trained in. So what this gentleman's talking about is a really good way to get into public art. And it's a long held tradition, particularly within the community built field, of finding people that will mentor you or work with you. I recently did a project with artists of color because it's a major issue of artists of color. They don't have the experience, they can't go forward. So I think it's a good question. I don't think him going ahead and just doing public art right away is an answer, as much as finding the people that are out there that may be willing to have him crew on a project. And I think it's a great, great thing, sir. I applaud you for that, because that's how I got into it. And so many artists I know who do public art.
And I appreciate that, because that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm self-taught. I work a lot with stone. I work with concrete. I'm teaching myself how to weld, but I'm 76, so I'm kind of running out of time. So working with somebody, I just appreciate being part of the project. I don't want to be the project.
Oh, okay.
I just enjoy working in art. I'm fine behind the scenes.
I just wanted to interject because I know we have a lot of other questions to get to, but I just wanted to know if Lynn or Phil, you feel like your question was generally answered, or Lynn, if you want to take another minute. But I do want to make sure that we can move on to the lot coming in.
No, that's fine. I'll just start looking for public art projects and then see if I can volunteer to help them.
Yeah, and Phil, what Tom said is exactly what I was hoping to happen, that other voices of experience with other experiences than what I've had or know about would speak up and say that. What I was hearing Phil was saying is that I was hearing the insecurity in his own work and about going forward. You have a lifetime of making art ahead of you. And I mean, a lifetime of making art behind you and a lifetime of making art ahead of you. And so I see a lot of art. What I was addressing is what I see in a lot of artists, which is like, I'm never ready. And it's like, start applying for things, but also you can do both. You can find an art, might become more familiar with your art community, start going to lectures, online or, virtual, whatever, and getting connected with your art community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Phil and Tom. That was great. I'm going to move on to the next question from Megan. We are in a city/county who do not want to help artists who don't have a big experience, but want to build a portfolio to win bigger commissions. Any advice for us to help with inclusion and access? How do we support mentorship? And Megan, if you're here and you want to elaborate in the chat or unmute Megan, that would be great. If you feel that I'm not, this goes for anyone, if you feel like I'm not getting the essence of your question, please feel free to make sure that that you let me know.
So I work for a city and county, and we do public art, and we're really interested in being this space on how do we help artists who want to build that portfolio. And I'm just looking for any advice from the artist perspective. So I think the questions about barriers are really helpful to us. We have a few projects right now that we're trying to do this with, but we're learning a lot. So from an artist perspective, what would be helpful for helping emerging artists kind of break into this field?
I think Tom has something to say about this again, because you did a project, right? Wait, unmute, Tom.
Yeah, you can go ahead and unmute. Do you want to start, Lynn? Well, oh, there we go.
Took me a little bit I'm on my phone. I want to share with you a video. I'll send you the link. I'm going to try and figure out how to do it on the chat. It's an 8-minute video specifically about your question. And I would love to see it get out there. It's a model of inclusion and getting artists started. It's a project that we did for 6 artists of color in our own community. So if I can share that on chat, I'd love to do that with you.
Maybe you
Yeah.
can send it to Nicole and.
Yeah, you can definitely drop it in the link, or I'll put my email in the link for everybody.
So Megan, to answer your question, I'm involved, with artists in the neighborhood here. In Chicago is extremely segregated and has a long history of enforced segregation. And I'm part of many people who are working on the new master plan for the city of Chicago, and I'm on the committee for art. And through talking to the people at the Department of Cultural Affairs, what they did was they mapped out where their grants have not been going historically. And they are doubling their efforts to create programs that enable disadvantaged and underrepresented neighborhoods. It's called the Neighborhood Arts Program, to submit their ideas to DK so that they're generated from the city. So that they're generated from the neighborhood, not from the city down. The other thing they're doing is they are literally using artists as ambassadors in these underserved communities, because there are artists like doing all kinds of amazing art projects in these underserved communities. They just aren't tapped into the system and into the network, like Phil was talking about. He's not part of an arts community. He might be part of an arts community like in, but it's not one that's part. So you have to go out into the field. And I assume you've probably already been doing that. What obstacles have you run into?
We've just started. We're a city county of about 75,000. So we're not a large city. And so, budget sometimes is an issue, but really it's an understanding, sometimes from our selection commission, that supporting emerging artists, they have a hard time separating out what they see as quality when they're making their selections. So they struggle with, young artist work or early work for artists of all ages. They kind of bring this different perspective. And they're doing fine with it, but it's a challenge sometimes to say, every artist needs to start somewhere, and we do want to have different types of projects. So I'd love to know what kinds of projects kind of help with that, but also the city can get behind, because it will be an installation, whether it's temporary or permanent, and how we can help describe this process to our boards and commissions that are involved in the selection that may not understand the journey. They're used to seeing just professional work. with people who have already been in the field for a long time.
Yeah, so changing that idea that everything doesn't have to look like it was made with someone who has an MFA. I mean, to get them to understand that community arts in all of its variety. I mean, we're including culinary arts now, and a lot of political artwork. There are some amazing artists out in our communities that are doing work that's about their communities, and the history and the experiences of their communities. And you have to just go to where, not only go to where they're at physically and stop, I'm sorry if I'm telling you stuff you've already figured out, because it's just all this sounds very obvious, but but then find out who the voices are and who the leaders are. And then they also have to be on the selection panels too, for your, I mean, it's hard, but then you can create these ambassadors to go out who are already part of these communities to spread the word. And it might be through churches, after school groups, the art some of the best people I've met that I've worked with, like on the south side of Chicago, which is one of the most disenfranchised, neighborhoods in the country, are the art teachers. And they're just like, they have these like special art classes for the kids who like want to stay after school and work on art. And, I met some kids who've never been outside of their neighborhood. And who, because there's so much, and because like, the north side of Chicago is just like terra incognita, just like the south side of Chicago is just like terra incognita to the north siders. And so yeah, start with the art teachers.
David, I saw that you have raised your hand. Was there something you wanted to ask or contribute?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to to add in a comment or two to Megan's question. I'm a director of a public art program in Canada, and one of the things that we're really looking at doing with kind of reshaping our public art program, and we have a benefit because we're actually in arm's reach of the city municipal corporate structure, so we have a little bit more freedom to move. But I would recommend looking at different models of commissioning artists that actually can work in the favor of emerging artists. Large public art projects really comes down to project management from the artist, or they have to bring someone on who can manage that project for them. They don't have the skills for time management, overseeing contractors, overseeing budget, liabilities, all of those things, contracts, insurance. But if you can actually remove some of those threatening barriers for an emerging artist, such as design-only competitions where, we're running one for a bus shelter right now where we are directing a call to emerging Indigenous artists. The artist only has to supply design. And we've worked with the construction and project team to actually look at some architectural grade materials that will be predetermined so that we don't have to worry about warranty, maintenance, vandalism, all of that stuff. And the project team is actually taking on that construction delivery of it. So the artist area of their scope of work is actually quite limited. But then as the city and your relationship with a project team, if it's a percent for art project or whatever, you can actually bring the artist through that process so that they can get more and more informed. And opportunities like that are fairly inexpensive. They're a bit more heavy on the administrative side of things. But I think if the goal is to really empower emerging artists and give them these opportunities, this is one tool that can be used that we've been using, and it seems to work really well.
That's awesome. And that reminds me, like wrapping utility boxes or putting their art up on billboards or, park benches, stuff like that. They're like little things you can do with people who have only done painting, for example, and who, don't know how to do project management for a $500,000 installation. That's an excellent suggestion.
Am I okay to move on to the next question? I really want to make sure I get to as many as I can. From Jerome, what is your opinion when a venue asks for art that is no older than 2 to 3 years old? Why does art that was created 10 years ago become unacceptable? It is and was art.
I know that really is a big obstacle to artists. Hopefully that's getting dropped more and more, but I still see it. I always just include work that's old, that's older. If they say something that's been done in the last 2 or 3 years, I just stick, you know, in order to flesh out my portfolio and show the full range of my work. Because, you know, I might do in 2 or 3 years to do public art, you know, to have, if they're asking for 20 slides of something that's been done in the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, that's really restrictive. So I would just ignore it and put in your own, put in what you've done. That's applicable to that application. I don't know if that was a satisfying answer, but, you know, sometimes you just have to ignore the rules. We're artists. That's expected.
I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but Cheryl wanted you to share more about the process of an emerging artist working with Fabricators. If anything to add to what we talked about.
I go into that a lot in my book because it is a big subject. It's just doing the research, starting to think about your work in another material and in another scale, and then finding those fabricators who can make that, and then getting to know them before, like doing some research before, seeing if they do fabrication for other artists. And there are just so many of them out there now. So Nicole, you put this up?
No, if we could maybe Lynn, if you want to finish this, and I think maybe this is Tom. Tom, if you want to take it down for now so Lynn can finish answering.
Yeah, sorry, I
No worries.
was just trying to send the link and I didn't mean the whole thing to come up.
Oh, that's okay.
No, it looks like
That's
it's full.
actually, it's the Soul Trans Diversity Sculpture Project on Vimeo. And it's specifically a project of involving artists of color that don't have experience and getting them in the public art field. Okay, and I'll get rid of it now if I can.
It looks like a really cool project. I'll just tell you quickly myself how I was a painter mostly, and I wanted my work to be translated into mosaics. And so I sought out some mosaic fabricators, Mosaica in Montreal, and I'm forgetting the one who's in upstate New York, Stephen Miotto, and I paid them to do samples of some of my paintings, and then I photographed those samples, and then in my application, I showed the painting that it came from, so that the selection panel could make the leap between, oh, this is what this mosaic would look like if this painting were translated into that. And from then, and I did that with terrazzo too. And so there are these little things you can do to assure the selection panel that you already have a fabricator in place that you've done your homework on that. So, I mean, I could talk for a long time about that. Does anybody else who's worked with fabricators have anything to say? Any other more experienced artists?
I think I saw something in the chat about Fabricators. This is from Taisha. Feel free to unmute. As a young artist myself, I think art city organizations can have a fabricator on board as a consultant on their end. This would be made clear in the open call. This way, the emerging artists have the means to realize their ideas. Perhaps the biggest barrier to emerging artists trying to do public work is practically.
That's a really, you'd think, you know, but and very, very, very few public art agencies are starting to do that now, because that would remove a huge obstacle for artists. Is if it's just like, we want a terrazzo floor. Here's the terrazzo fabricator that the general contractor has already contracted with. Give us your design. you know, you don't have to project manage the whole thing. We'll give you a finalist fee of, you know, 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever for your design, and they will make it. It's, you know, it's a mystery to me why more agencies aren't doing that, because it would be so enabling to artists who are trying to make the leap from, you know, a studio medium to a public art commission.
Kristen, you can go ahead and unmute. I see you've raised your hand.
Okay, great. Thanks. This is, you know, of course, this is such an important conversation. And as a long-standing public art manager, and I run the program for the city of Oakland, California, we have, you know, so many talented artists. See, I can't even hold my phone here. I'm like, we're still trying to get used to working in our offices again. The challenge that we have that has been sort of articulated by many in different ways today is that despite being a fairly large city and with, you know, such a wealth of talent here, we still actually have a very small agency, and the amount of money that we have for commissions is pretty small. And, you know, there's a lot more on the private development side at the moment, which we do touch, but we're not managing those projects. And as you were just alluding to, Lynn, our friends across the Bay in San Francisco have, where I used to work, have definitely migrated to using that model of hiring an artist to be a part of the design process and then managing fabrication and installation internally. But that does require, as David also alluded to, much, you know, many more staff and staff resources, which is a different kind of political discussion, you know, for may or may not be what people want to hear about here, but just, you know, where our elected officials want the money to go to the artists, not to staff, even if really, you know, giving it to higher staff would help the artists to have access. So in trying to be creative, one thing that we've done historically here since the program was established in '89, as funds were available, is something that is akin to what you were also describing, Lynn, which was more of a artist initiated project program that we called Open Proposals. Also, the Rainin Foundation, which is a local foundation, has run a program called Open Spaces, which is similar, which are, again, artist conceived projects for the public realm. They may be permanent or temporary in nature. And the, you know, city may issue the call for those as kind of conceptual proposals, not like full RFPs, but where we're allowing the artists to bring their ideas to us rather than top-down concept. And that has, I think that really has been such a wonderful model. Again, it's kind of funding contingent because so much of the funding that we have is restricted if it's bond funding or has other requirements that associated, you know, with being permanent work. And the other challenge that I'm curious to know if other people have come up with creative ways to work around this with those bond funds is that they also have a cap on, you know, what we refer to as a soft costs, right? So how much can be used for administration and the artist design fees. So whenever we start exploring the concept of having a mentorship program, we also have to be mindful of how much are we asking the artists to do and how much can we compensate them out of the total project budget, recognizing that it's you know, very expensive to live in the Bay Area at least. So final recent efforts that we've undertaken are one program that my manager leader, you know, our visionary leader here, Roberto Bedoya, launched what's referred to as our cultural strategist program, which is to bring artists, cultural workers into different city departments to help kind of creatively untie some knots. And one of those is going to be working with our public art program on new strategies for reaching out to artists and creating different kinds of mentorship opportunities, kind of demystifying the process. It's something that we keep talking about here regionally in Northern California and as well as across the state, how to, you know, create more access. And as part of that, I think what we're finally really going to do is try to work regionally to say, if every Oakland artist is waiting for a commission from the city of Oakland, a lot of people are not going to get it because we just don't have many commissions. But if you can get on the San Francisco artist registry and, you might get a commission there that then you can bring back to another project that you do here in Oakland, and also to create more of those opportunities for fabricators to meet with artists, because I think that's really wonderful. I mean, everything you described, Lynn, is really, I think, quite valuable to say, hey, this is how I'm thinking about translating my work. Let me, I'm a creative person. Let me model how that might happen. Even if you don't have all of the details, that shows a selection panel that you're thinking about it, right? That you're anticipating what some of these issues are. And I think that's a lot of what those selection panels are looking for, is that you're thinking broadly about how you're going to tackle these, challenges. Not that you have all the answers, right?
It's right. It's so great. I'm so glad you jumped in. It's so great to hear from the art administrators. And one thing brings up a point right now, it's like every public art agency around the country has looked around the table and said, oh my God, it's all white people sitting here. And so there's this huge scramble right now to figure out how to get Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian, people of, just to get diversity and inclusion, to use the catchphrase, as part of public art. And the agencies are realizing that they don't have the systems in place to reach out to the people who have been, institutionally disenfranchised and systemically disenfranchised. It's not, they're not those, and frankly, just discouraged. So it's just really exciting to see this whole new territory of ways of reaching artists opening up, but we're just at the very beginning stages of it.
Okay, we have a lot of questions. So I'll try and keep moving so we can get to as many as possible. This one comes from Sabine. How do you protect your idea and intellectual property when you submit a proposal? She's done public work and was contracted for one opportunity and later found out her other idea was pirated.
I used to really worry about that too. And now I just put it out there and take my chances. I don't think it's that common. I know one artist, Jack Mackey in Seattle, whose idea of the dance steps that's copied all the time, and he just sues people. He has like an attorney on staff and he just sues people for it. And I've had my paintings copied, and I just raise holy hell with the and confront the people who've done it. I mean, I actually don't know. I mean, I have my ways. I've heard of how other artists are dealing with it. But my point is that shouldn't stop you from putting your work out there, and just go ahead, put it out there and deal with those rare occasions as they occur.
Okay, and we have some really great comments as well. I just wanted to address from Zelda, where she lives, where they live in South Africa. It is often a condition that to be granted a public art commission, the artist has to also mentor a young or inexperienced artist who's previously disadvantaged, so that they can learn to make their own maquette and also work on the larger commission granted to the professional artist.
Yeah, that's like what Phil was talking about. A few agencies do that. I'm surprised that more don't. I know a project I did in North Carolina, they asked, they said one of the requirements is to work with a local artist, and also something I did in Kingsport, Tennessee was the same thing. So those are actually few and far between. We should do it more. I used to say it every chance I would get at the Public Art Network conferences, but it's one thing to sit on the outside and say, hey, you should do this, and quite another thing to be running a public art agency and to be able to do all of the good ideas that you have. But yeah, that would be great if somebody did it, if more places did it.
And David has, for those of you who are in the chat or looking, has so kindly put in a link to a resource series about all the aspects of a public art process. So in addition to coming back to this recording for Lynn, there's a link in there as well. All right, we have a question from Pavel. Do the fabricators accept small scale models for enlargement?
Oh, yeah, they would love that. They would love it if you had all the angles worked out and everything. What I submit is just a SketchUp model, and then they have to figure out all the hard stuff, like how to make that thing actually stand up. So, and not only do the fabricators like small scale models, but if you are a finalist for Public Art Commission and you come into the meeting with the selection panel with the small scale model, they just love that, because not a lot of, some people on the selection panel, they'll be able to like really understand the thing when they see it in small scale. I usually I do mine all on SketchUp, and I mock it into the scene. But the small scale model is a winner every time.
We have a technical question. Is there red tape that needs to be navigated when public art is installed? I always wonder what the safety protocols are to installing public art, and if there are building codes that translate to public artwork.
Anytime you are chosen to actually do a public art commission, you will be asked for liability insurance. So that brings me to another thing. You need to find someone, an insurance company that will provide you commercial liability for up to $2 million per occurrence. I found one called the Hartford, and they do my commercial liability insurance. It's kind of hard to find someone who knows how to underwrite, but that's something you can ask other artists. I asked Terry Karpowitz, a local artist here, who he uses to do his big giant sculptures, and he pointed me to the insurance agent I have now at the Hartford. And what was the second part of the question? Oh no, I know what I was going to say. I have always had good luck with all of the public art commissions I've done. Is the public art administrator takes care of that. The public art administrator for the agency that's commissioning the work runs interference with the city or the county or whatever the government entity is that you're doing the artwork for. So they will make sure that you have the permit. Some of the littler, less experienced public art agencies will say you need to go get the building permit, or the site permit, or whatever if you need from the city. And then as the artist, you say, no, that's not my job, because that's just not practical for me to do, and throw it back into their court. And then they will be like, oh, okay, that's how other agencies do it. Oh, okay, all right, we'll do it.
Scrolling. Okay, let's see. We have time for this one. This is a particular. Oh, Matt, you raised your hand. Did you want to?
Oh, yeah, I could add a little to that answer to that question. If you're doing something that's three-dimensional, you're going to need a structural engineer to do a drawing and stamp it. That will be required. And the issue about permits and building codes, it's different in every location. Seattle, I had to become a contractor, a licensed contractor in Seattle, which was just paperwork and $114. And because there are no specific building codes for art, the people in charge of the building codes in the city sometimes just make it up. But generally, they're mostly concerned with the footing, the concrete footing. And then we'll accept the drawing you submit that was stamped by a structural engineer.
That's such an important point. Thank you for bringing that up. Structural engineer licensed in that state.
Right. And most of them are licensed in,
Every state.
no matter where they live, they're licensed in dozens of states.
Mhm.
Thank you. And thank you for those who are virtually raising your hand. It makes it much easier to see that you have something to contribute. So if you can do that moving forward, you'd like to, instead of literally raising your hand, that's greatly appreciated. Oh, and Tom has put his link, his video link in the chat. So thank you, Tom. Let me see. Okay. The next question, do you have experience with public art consultants since they manage some of the logistics you're talking about? Structural engineering, permits, delivery, installation, etc.
There's some like via partnership and, you know, others that I'm blanking on, and they are hired by the client. So they're hired by the city or the Parks Department or whatever to commission an artist. So the client pays them, the artist does not pay them. I work with a lot of art consultants with my paintings, and I hardly know any that work to commission public art. I literally don't know any. Do any of the other artists on this group, have you ever worked with an art consultant who's brought you a public art commission?
Actually, I do that quite a lot. So I get most of my commissions from and via art consultants. And I've actually started consulting myself and contracting other artists as a follow-up of that. And it has actually worked very well for me.
Oh, what's your name?
And they also, Sabine.
Sabine, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting because yeah.
And that's actually who mentored me. I wanted to jump in earlier. Like, I think it's a good idea to have a mentor, and if you can work with an artist, but who actually mentored me was not just other artists, but I had a really good art consultant, and that was really helpful. And that, you know, you just have to get in there and do the work, and you learn about the legal issues and the practical issues. And then you find your fabricators, or the art consultant sometimes can even help you find suitable fabricators. So that was very...
That's very helpful. The other thing that Phil was asking was like, how do you go about finding a mentor? Could you say a little bit about that?
Well, I did what I wrote in the chat earlier, keep applying. I mean, the art consultants found me. It was really literally just go in, go on Cafe, go on Public Artists, go on CodaWorks and apply for the opportunities, because they all are run by art administrators, and it's a numbers game. When your work fits, eventually you will get a job out of it.
Well, okay. Are you talking about, well, he was talking about other artists to work for, to learn the ropes.
Excuse me, can you say that again?
He was talking about other artists to work for, so he could learn the ropes.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, it was a two-way lane. I mean, as you start working in the industry, you meet other public artists, and obviously the one thing is just to go out there and meet them. You can't sit at home. That's the number one thing. But if you, the one line is to work with our consultants, and then the second is, and some, like, for example, here in Texas, our city, they actually have programs where they, you sign up for the city, you go into an artist pool, you apply for that pool, and then they team you up at times. So like,
that's interesting. Okay,
emerging artist with an experienced one. Or what they also do is they offer art services pools, where if you're not confident enough or you don't have your portfolio to run and manage your own public art project for them, you can apply for services. For example, you're an excellent welder, and then I have no idea about metal art because I do stone,
Sabine,
but I will hire you.
That's really helpful. I want to ask Zelda to weigh in on this. And so Zelda, you work with, you said, yes, you have experience with public art consultants. Can you talk a little bit more about how they work as your agent? That's what I'm really interested in.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, yeah. So I've done quite a lot of, I've done about 15 life-size figurative projects, and they often go out on tender. So what government would do in South Africa is they would put out a tender for proposals and ideas, and an agent would then approach me and ask me to put forward a maquette, and they would pay me a minimal amount for the maquette. But if we win the contract, then I obviously get paid fairly well for the project. But then it is also, as I mentioned before, part of that is mentoring a student or a person of color in South Africa, because of the fact that education was very preferential towards white South Africans before. So that is part of the government's project, but the agent then deals directly with government or deals with the developer on a project and so on, so that I can just focus on working.
Okay,
And I
so
don't
Calvin,
have-
sorry to interrupt, we're running out of time. So I just to clarify, this is not, these are private art consultants.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. They look for projects. They look for
Okay.
projects and then they approach artists.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Nicole, we're at time, so I'm just gonna cut people off rudely here, but because I want to, because I could go on all day, so I want to just like turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think we all could go on all day.
This is great. I really appreciate everybody weighing in and the questions and the answers from the more experienced artists. That was great.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We tried to get through as much as we can, but boy, does an hour go fast when you were talking to Lynn Basa. That's what we learned today. So thank you all so much for being here, for your contributions. As I mentioned earlier, this is being recorded and we'll have a transcript as well, so that will be available to you. Look out for that. Thank you, as always, Lynn, for your insight and your time. We greatly appreciate it. We do have one